Being a sheriff isn't just a badge and a gun, it's facing the things others run from. These 5 real experiences reveal how the open highways, empty towns, and long nights can break a man. When duty calls in the dark, sometimes something worse answers. I'm using a different voice. Hope it chills you.
I was halfway through my patrol along US 491, where it cuts through the empty stretch between Moab, Utah, and Durango, Colorado, a ribbon of asphalt flanked by nothing but sand, scrub, and the occasional gnarled juniper. My cruiser's tires hummed against the road, the only sound besides the faint whistle of wind through the cracked window. It was late afternoon, and the heat was starting to relent, giving way to the creeping chill of a desert night. I'd been a deputy with San Juan County for 6 years, long enough to know this route was usually quiet. Smugglers, drifters, or the occasional lost tourist. Those were the worst I'd encounter. But something about this evening felt off. The air had a weight to it, like the desert was holding its breath. I spotted the truck just past mile marker 47, where the highway dips toward a dry wash. It was an old Chevy, rusted to hell, parked crookedly off the shoulder. The hood was pocked with dents, and the paint had flaked away to a mottled gray. No plates, front or back. Both doors were wide open, like the driver had bolted in a hurry. I slowed the cruiser, pulling onto the gravel, and called it in. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Hargrove. Got an abandoned vehicle on 491, just past the wash near mile marker 47. Old pickup, no plates. Checking it out." "Copy that, Hargrove," came the reply, crackling through the radio. "Proceed with caution." "Want backup?" "Nah, looks deserted. I'll report back in a few." I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. The air smelled of dust and creosote. The truck was silent, no ticking engine, no hum of life. But when I rested my hand on the hood, it was warm. Not hot, like it had been driven hard, but warm enough to know it hadn't been sitting long. That pricked at my instincts. Abandoned vehicles out here weren't uncommon, breakdowns, joyriders ditching stolen cars, but a warm engine meant someone had been here recently. Very recently. I circled the truck, my hand resting on my holster. The windows were grimy, the interior littered with fast food wrappers and a torn blanket draped over the passenger seat. No keys in the ignition. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Just empty. I scanned the surrounding desert, but the fading light made it hard to pick out details. The wash nearby was a shallow scar in the earth, lined with brittle brush and smooth stones. Nothing moved. Then I saw the footprints. They were in the sand just off the shoulder, a chaotic loop circling the truck. Bare feet, clear as day, pressed deep into the soft earth. Whoever made them had been pacing, around and around, maybe for hours. The tracks didn't lead anywhere. They just circled. No trail coming from the road or heading toward the wash. It was like the person had appeared out of nowhere, walked in circles, and then vanished. I crouched, studying the prints. They were human, no question, 5 toes, the arch of a foot, but something about them felt wrong. The impressions were too perfect, too uniform, like they'd been stamped rather than walked. And they were deep, deeper than my own boots were sinking into the sand. Whoever made them was heavy, or pressing hard. Deliberately. The hairs on my neck stood up. I straightened, scanning the horizon again. The desert was still, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was watching me. My radio crackled, sharp and sudden, making me flinch. "Deputy, do not approach the vehicle." I froze. The voice was low, urgent, and eerily familiar. It sounded like me, same cadence, same slight drawl I'd picked up from years in the Southwest. But I hadn't touched my radio. My hand was still on my holster. I pressed the transmit button. "Dispatch, repeat that?" Static. Then silence. No response. "Dispatch, this is Hargrove." "Who just transmitted?" More static, then a faint voice. "Lisa, the dispatcher I'd known since I started." "Hargrove, I didn't hear anything. You okay out there?" My mouth went dry. Yeah, I'm fine. Just checking." I stared at the truck, the open doors, the footprints. The rational part of my brain screamed to get back in the cruiser, call for backup, and wait. But I've never been good at listening to that part. I needed to know what was going on. I drew my flashlight and clicked it on, the beam cutting through the twilight. I followed the footprints, keeping my distance from the truck. The circle was tight, maybe 10 feet in diameter, and the tracks overlapped in places, like the person had been at it for a while. I counted at least a dozen loops before I stopped, realizing I was getting nowhere. The wash was nearby, maybe 30 yards off, and I figured if the driver had gone anywhere, it'd be there. Some cover, a place to hide. I moved toward the wash, my boots sinking into the sand. The wind picked up, carrying a low moan that could have been the air moving through the brush or something else entirely. I swept the flashlight across the ground, looking for more tracks. Nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed sand leading to the edge of the wash. At the lip, I stopped. The wash was deeper than it looked from the road, maybe 8 feet down with steep banks. My beam caught something glinting at the bottom, a piece of metal, half buried in the dirt. I squinted, trying to make it out. It looked like a hubcap, but it was too far to be sure. I started down the slope, careful not to slip. That's when I heard it. A low, rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat. It was faint, coming from somewhere. The truck? The wash? I couldn't tell. I froze, listening, my own pulse hammering in my ears. The thumping stopped, replaced by a faint scraping sound, like something dragging across the sand. I swung the flashlight around, but the beam caught nothing but shadows. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. No answer. Just the wind, louder now, whistling through the wash. I should have turned back. I know that now. But I didn't. I slid down into the wash, my boots hitting the bottom with a soft thud. The air was cooler here, heavier. The glinting object was closer now, a hubcap, rusted like the truck, half covered in dirt. I crouched to inspect it, and that's when I saw the second set of tracks. These were different. Shallower, less defined, like someone had tried to scuff them out. They led away from the hubcap, deeper into the wash, toward a cluster of rocks that formed a natural alcove. My flashlight beam trembled slightly as I followed them. The thumping started again, louder now, closer. It wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from the rocks. I don't know why I kept going. Curiosity, stupidity, or something else, something pulling me forward. The alcove was dark, the rocks casting long shadows that swallowed my light. The tracks stopped at the edge, like whoever made them had vanished into the stone itself. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, and shone the flashlight into the gap. There was a figure there. It was crouched, facing away, its back hunched and its head bowed. Barefoot, dressed in tattered clothes that hung off its frame like rags. The thumping stopped the moment my light hit it. It didn't move, didn't turn, just sat there, still as death. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You okay?" "I'm a deputy. I'm here to help." Nothing. Not a twitch. My hand went to my gun, not drawing it but ready. "Turn around." Slowly. The figure shifted, just slightly, its head tilting as if listening. Then, in a voice that was unmistakably mine, same tone, same drawl, it said, "Deputy, do not approach." I stumbled back, my flashlight beam jerking wildly. The figure didn't move, but its voice echoed in my head, clear as if it had come from my own throat. My radio crackled again, unprompted, spitting static, and then my voice again. "Get out. Now." I didn't wait to see if it would turn around. I scrambled up the wash, my boots slipping on the loose dirt, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. When I reached the top, I glanced back. The alcove was empty. No figure, no tracks, nothing but shadows. I ran to the cruiser, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Hargrove. I need backup at mile marker 47 now. Something's not right." "Copy, Hargrove." Lisa's voice came back, steady but concerned. "Backup's en route. ETA 20 minutes. You safe?" "Yeah." I lied, my eyes locked on the truck. "Just hurry." I sat there, engine running, headlights trained on the pickup. The doors were still open, swaying slightly in the wind. The footprints were still there, circling endlessly. I didn't look at the wash. I didn't want to see if anything was climbing out. 20 minutes later, 2 cruisers pulled up, their lights flashing. Deputies Martinez and Klein got out, hands on their holsters, scanning the scene. I told them everything, well, almost everything. I left out the part about the voice being mine. They'd think I was losing it. Martinez checked the truck, confirming it was empty. Klein followed the footprints, same as I had, but he didn't go into the wash. "Weird as hell," he said, shaking his head. "No tracks leading away. Like they just stopped." We towed the truck, marked the scene, and called it a night. The official report said abandoned vehicle, possible transient activity. But I knew better. Something was out there, something that knew my voice, my name. Something that didn't want me getting too close. I haven't patrolled that stretch of 491 since. I requested a transfer to day shifts, sticking closer to Moab. But sometimes at night, when the wind howls through my window, I swear I hear it, that low, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat in the dark. And sometimes when I'm alone, my radio crackles, and I hear my own voice whisper, "Deputy, do not approach." I don't know what was in that wash. I don't know what made those tracks. But I know one thing, I'm never going back to find out. The radio crackled to life at 2:17 a.m., shattering the silence of my patrol truck. I was parked on a dirt pull-off along FM 1021, just outside Eagle Pass, Texas, where the lights of Piedras Negras, Mexico, shimmered across the Rio Grande. The border here is a ribbon of murky water, no wider than a football field, flanked by scrubby mesquite and huasach trees. The air was thick with the smell of dust and river mud, even in the dead of night. Eagle Pass International Bridge loomed a mile west, its sodium vapor lights casting an orange glow over the crossing, where trucks rumbled through customs 24/7. "Sheriff Torres," the dispatcher's voice hissed, strained. "Got a call about a wreck on FM 1021, mile marker 14. Multiple vehicles, possible fatalities. Caller said it's bad, real bad." I frowned, glancing at the dashboard clock. Mile marker 14 was just a quarter mile up the road, a desolate stretch of two-lane blacktop running parallel to the river. I'd been out here for hours, running routine patrols, and hadn't seen a soul. No headlights, no brake lights, nothing but the occasional coyote darting across the pavement. "Dispatch, confirm location," I said, keying the mic. "I'm right near 14, and there's nothing out here." A pause then. Caller was insistent, "Sheriff. Said it's happening now. EMS and fire are en route." I shifted the truck into gear, unease prickling my neck. The caller's urgency didn't sit right. FM 1021 is a lonely road, flanked by ranchland on the north and the Rio Grande's muddy banks on the south. Smugglers used it sometimes, but Border Patrol had checkpoints closer to town. A wreck this bad, this close, and I'd have heard it, metal crunching, glass shattering something. I eased onto the road, headlights slicing through the dark. The mesquite trees cast gnarled shadows, their branches clawing at the sky. To my left, the river glinted faintly, its surface rippling under a sliver of moon. Piedras Negras' skyline was a low smudge of lights across the water, the Plaza de las Culturas floodlit pyramids barely visible. The border felt alive here, a place where two worlds pressed against each other, tense and uneasy. At mile marker 14 I stopped. Nothing. No skid marks, no twisted metal, no flickering taillights. Just the hum of my engine and the distant yip of a coyote. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The air was cool for June, maybe 70 degrees, but sweat beaded on my forehead. I swept the beam across the road, then down the embankment toward the river. The water lapped softly, and a rustle in the reeds made me pause, probably a raccoon or an armadillo. "Dispatch, this is Torres," I radioed. No sign of any accident at mile marker 14. "You got a callback number for the caller?" Another pause, longer this time. "No number, Sheriff." Call came through a payphone at the Val Verde gas station on Veterans Boulevard. Anonymous. I cursed under my breath. Prank calls weren't uncommon, but something about this felt off. The Val Verde station was 5 miles away, near the bridge. Why call from there about a wreck here? I climbed back into the truck, ready to head toward town, when the radio screeched again. "Sheriff, we've got another call," the dispatcher said, her voice tight. "Same location, FM 1021, mile marker 14. Caller says you're already there, working the scene." My hand froze on the gear shift. "What the hell do you mean I'm already there?" "I'm telling you, there's nothing here." I don't know, Sheriff." Caller was hysterical, said they saw your truck, lights flashing and bodies on the ground. "They're sure it's you." I scanned the empty road, heart thudding. No sirens, no EMS, just the endless drone of cicadas. "Cancel the response teams," I said. "I'm checking it out. And trace that damn call." I killed the engine and stepped out again, flashlight in one hand, the other resting on my holstered Glock. The river's murmur seemed louder now, almost rhythmic, like a chant. I walked the shoulder, beam darting over the pavement. A glint caught my eye, something metallic in the ditch. I crouched, heart racing, and found a crushed beer can, rusted and half-buried. Nothing recent. Then I heard it, a low, guttural moan, coming from the riverbank. I swung the flashlight toward the sound, my breath catching. The reeds swayed, but there was no wind. "Who's there?" I called, voice steady despite the chill creeping up my spine. No answer, just another moan, fainter now like it was fading into the water. I descended the embankment, boots sinking into the soft mud. The river was shallow here, no more than knee-deep, but the current was strong. Across the water, Piedras Negras felt closer, its lights brighter, almost beckoning. I pushed through the reeds, flashlight cutting through the dark. The moan came again, sharper, and I froze. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. It was too deep, too hollow, like air escaping a punctured lung. "Sheriff's Department," I shouted, hand on my gun. "Show yourself." The reeds parted, and for a split second, I saw it, a figure tall and gaunt, standing in the shallows. Its face was obscured, but its eyes glinted like wet glass. Before I could react, it vanished, melting into the water. My flashlight beam wavered, catching only ripples spreading across the surface. I backed up, pulse hammering. I'd seen things out here before, smugglers, migrants, even cartel lookouts, but nothing like that. I scrambled up the bank, radioing dispatch. "I need backup at mile marker 14 now. Possible suspect in the area." "Copy, Sheriff," came the reply. "Units are 10 minutes out." 10 minutes felt like an eternity. I stood by my truck, scanning the darkness. The river's chant grew louder, and with it, a new sound, tires screeching, metal grinding screams. I whipped around, expecting to see headlights, but the road was empty. The noises were coming from everywhere and nowhere, echoing in my skull. Then my radio blared, unprompted. "Sheriff Torres, why aren't you helping them?" A voice rasped, not the dispatcher's. It was wet, garbled, like someone speaking underwater. "They're dying. You're too late." I yanked the mic free. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." Laughter, low and bubbling, filled the channel. "You'll see them soon." The radio went dead. I stared at it, hands shaking, when headlights appeared in the distance. 2 patrol cars and an ambulance, lights flashing. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last. Deputy Ramirez was the first out, his face pale under the brim of his hat. "Sheriff, what the hell's going on?" he asked, eyeing the empty road. "Dispatch said you were in trouble." I recounted the calls, the figure in the river, the noises. Ramirez exchanged a look with the other deputy, Garcia. "You sure you're okay, boss?" Garcia asked. "This place, it gets to people sometimes." "I know what I saw," I snapped. "And those calls didn't come from nowhere." We searched the area for an hour. No tracks, no debris, no sign of anyone. The EMS crew left, grumbling about false alarms. Ramirez stayed with me, his flashlight sweeping the riverbank. "You know the stories, right?" he said quietly. "About this stretch of the border?" I nodded. Locals in Eagle Pass and Piedras Negras whispered about the river, how it held on to the dead. Migrants who drowned, cartel victims dumped in the current, even soldiers from the Mexican-American War. Some said their spirits lingered, angry and restless. I'd always dismissed it as folklore, but tonight doubt gnawed at me. "Check this out," Ramirez called, crouching near the water. He pointed to a patch of mud, where a single footprint pressed deep, bare, impossibly long, with claw-like toes. My stomach churned. No human foot looked like that. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. My truck at mile marker 14, lights flashing, surrounded by mangled cars. Bodies lay scattered on the pavement, their faces blurred but somehow familiar. In the foreground, I saw myself, kneeling beside a corpse, my face twisted in horror. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m., June 16, 2025, tomorrow. I dropped the phone, ball rising in my throat. Ramirez grabbed it, his eyes widening. "What the fuck is this?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But we need to get out of here." We drove back to the station in silence, the photo burning in my mind. I filed a report, omitting the supernatural details. The calls were untraceable, the payphone at Val Verde out of service for months. By dawn, I was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing that figure in the river, its glinting eyes. The next night, I avoided FM 1021, sticking to patrols in town. But at 2:17 a.m., my radio crackled. "Sheriff Torres, accident reported on FM 1021, mile marker 14. Multiple vehicles, possible fatalities." My blood ran cold. I radioed back, voice shaking. "Dispatch," confirmed the caller. "No caller ID," came the reply. "Anonymous tip." I sped toward the scene, praying it was a coincidence. As I neared mile marker 14, headlights flared in the distance. Screeching tires, crunching metal, screams. It was happening. I floored it, arriving to find a nightmare. A pickup truck accordioned into a sedan, a third car overturned in the ditch. Blood streaked the pavement, and bodies lay motionless. I leapt out, radioing for help, and froze. One of the victims, a woman in a torn dress, stared at me with glassy eyes. Her face was mine. The world tilted. I stumbled back, gasping, as the figure from the river emerged from the shadows, its gaunt form towering over the wreckage. "You were warned." It rasped, its voice like drowning. "Now you're part of it." I drew my gun, firing wildly, but the bullets passed through it. The figure dissolved into the river, leaving only ripples. EMS arrived minutes later, and I worked the scene in a daze, every moment mirroring the photo. My deputies didn't notice the woman with my face. She was gone when they arrived. Weeks later, the accident was ruled a hit and run, the driver never found. I stopped patrolling FM 1021, but the river's chant follows me. Every night at 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzes with a new photo, another accident, another me, always at mile marker 14. I don't know what that thing in the river is, but it's not done with me, and I'm terrified of what happens when it is. When I first heard the story of Sheriff Ray Carrillo, I'd only been sheriff of Hudspeth County, Texas, for a month, and the weight of the badge still felt foreign on my chest. Hudspeth is a sparse, rugged stretch of land along the U.S.-Mexico border, about 60 miles southeast of El Paso, where the Rio Grande carves a lazy path through cotton fields and mesquite-dotted plains. It's a place where the silence is louder than the wind, and the border is both a line on a map and a living, breathing thing, marked by barbed wire fences, black water jugs left by migrants, and the occasional hum of Border Patrol drones. I was sitting in the sheriff's office in Sierra Blanca, a town of barely 500 souls, when Deputy Martinez, a grizzled veteran with sun-creased eyes, leaned back in his chair and told me about Carrillo. "Ray was a good man," he said, his voice low, like he was sharing a secret with the desert itself. "But he went out to that field near Fort Hancock one night, answering a 911 call, and he never came back." I pressed for details, but Martinez just shook his head. "Some things you don't question out here. You just steer clear of that place." Fort Hancock is a small community in Hudspeth County, a cluster of low-slung houses, a gas station, and a feed store, where irrigation canals feed alfalfa fields and the Rio Grande glints under the midday sun. It's a place where everyone knows everyone, and the border is just a short walk from most backyards. The field Martinez spoke of lies about 2 miles south of town, near where the border fence drops from a high pedestrian barrier to a low cattle fence, easy to step over if you know where to look. It's a flat, empty expanse of cracked earth and brittle grass, flanked by cotton fields to the north and the river to the south. At night, it's swallowed by darkness, save for the distant glow of Mexican farmhouses across the border. The story gnawed at me. A sheriff doesn't just vanish. So one evening, I decided to see the field for myself. I drove my patrol truck down FM 192, a narrow road that cuts through the desert, past the skeletal remains of abandoned adobe houses and the occasional jackrabbit darting into the brush. The air smelled of dust and creosote, and the sky was a deep indigo, pricked with stars. I parked near the field, my headlights cutting through the gloom, and stepped out. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint rustle of mesquite branches in the breeze. The field stretched out before me, maybe 100 acres, its edges blurred by the night. I could just make out the border fence in the distance, a dark silhouette against the horizon. Scattered across the ground were signs of passage: a torn backpack, a discarded water jug, a single worn-out shoe. Migrants often cross here, slipping through gaps in the fence, guided by smugglers or their own desperate hope. But tonight, the field felt empty, like it was holding its breath. I pulled the case file on Carrillo from my truck, its pages yellowed and brittle. The 911 call had come in on a sweltering July night 2 years ago, from an unknown number. The caller, a man with a heavy accent, claimed he'd seen something strange in the field, lights moving where no lights should be. Carrillo, known to locals as Cameron for his red face or short stature, had radioed in that he was checking it out. His last transmission was calm. "I'm at the field south of Fort Hancock." Nothing yet. Then nothing. His patrol truck was found the next morning, parked at the edge of the field, keys in the ignition, no sign of struggle. It was like the desert had swallowed him whole. I walked the field's perimeter, my boots crunching on the dry earth. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of sage. To the west, the Rio Grande murmured, its waters reflecting the faint moonlight. Across the river, I could see the lights of El Porvenir, a Mexican town that's seen its share of violence from drug cartels. Fort Hancock's residents talk about the spillover, stray bullets, bodies washing up on the riverbank. The field itself is a crossing point, a place where smugglers and migrants skirt border patrol checkpoints further north. As I moved deeper into the field, I noticed something odd, a faint indentation in the ground, like a shallow trench, partially covered by blown sand. It was about 6 feet long, too regular to be natural. I crouched down, my flashlight beam catching flecks of something metallic, a zipper, maybe, or a belt buckle. My pulse quickened. The desert hides things, but it doesn't always keep them secret. I marked the spot with a rock and made a mental note to bring Martinez out here tomorrow. That's when I heard it, a low hum, like a distant engine coming from the south. I turned toward the border, my hand resting on my holster. The hum grew louder, then stopped abruptly. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before. I scanned the darkness, my flashlight beam slicing through the night, but saw nothing. Just the fence, the river, and the endless desert. Still, the hair on my neck stood up. I thought of Carrillo, alone out here, chasing a call that didn't make sense. The locals have their theories. Some say Carrillo stumbled onto a cartel drop and paid the price. Others whisper about vigilantes, groups like the Border Regulators or Minutemen, patrolling the border with their own brand of justice. A few old-timers talk about ghosts, spirits of migrants who died crossing the desert, haunting places like this. I don't buy the supernatural, but standing in that field, I understood why people might. I drove back to Sierra Blanca, the field's emptiness lingering in my mind. The next day, I called Martinez and a forensics team to check the trench. They found nothing but a rusted belt buckle, no human remains, no clues. Martinez didn't say much, just stared at the field like it was an old enemy. "This place don't give up its secrets easy," he muttered. Weeks passed, and I kept digging into Carrillo's case. I interviewed locals in Fort Hancock, their voices tight with unease. Jesse Rubio, a mechanic who'd known Carrillo, told me about the tension along the border, militarized patrols, National Guard skyboxes rising from the sand like giant insects. Citizens asked for papers at sheriff's blockades. "Ray was one of us," Rubio said. "He didn't deserve to go like that." Requested records from Border Patrol, but their reports were vague, routine patrols, no unusual activity the night Carrillo vanished. I even crossed into El Porvenir, meeting with a Mexican police contact who shrugged and said, "The desert eats people. You know that. The truth is, I don't know what happened to Ray Carrillo. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have, a smuggler's deal, a vigilante's ambush, or just the wrong kind of light in the wrong kind of place. Maybe the field itself holds the answer, buried under layers of sand and silence. As sheriff, I've learned that Hudspeth County is a land of unanswered questions, where the border blurs more than just geography. Every night, I drive past that field, its edges softened by dusk. I keep my eyes on the horizon, half expecting to see a figure step out of the darkness. Carrillo, maybe, or someone else the desert claimed. I haven't heard that hum again, but I feel the field watching, waiting. It's out there now, under the same stars, holding its secrets tight. I've been a state trooper in Maine for 7 years, patrolling the long, lonely stretches of highway that cut through pine forests and hug the rocky coast. The job suits me, quiet nights, open roads, and the occasional moose crossing to keep things interesting. But last fall, during a routine patrol in northern Maine, something happened that I still can't explain. I took a wrong turn and ended up in a town that doesn't exist. It was late October 2024, just past 9 p.m. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your nose, and the sky was clear, stars scattered like salt over the black expanse. I was cruising along Route 11, north of Ashland, in Aroostook County. This part of Maine is remote, miles of potato fields and dense forest, with towns so small they're little more than a gas station and a church. My radio was quiet, just the occasional crackle of dispatch checking in. I was headed toward Fort Kent, about an hour away, when I noticed a side road I didn't recognize. The road wasn't marked, no sign, no mile marker. It branched off to the right, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt swallowed by towering pines. My GPS didn't show it, but I figured it might be an old logging road. Curiosity got the better of me. I'd been patrolling these parts for years, and thought I knew every backroad. I turned on my high beams and eased onto the road, the cruiser's tires crunching over loose gravel. The forest closed in fast. The pines were massive, their branches knitting together overhead, blocking out the stars. The road twisted and dipped, and after about 10 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen a single landmark. No mileposts, no clearings, not even a deer crossing. The radio went dead, not even static. My GPS screen flickered, then went blank. I should have turned back, but something kept me going, like the road was pulling me forward. Then, out of nowhere, the trees parted, and I rolled into a town. It was small, maybe a dozen buildings clustered around a single street. A wooden sign at the edge read Hollowell, in faded white paint. I'd never heard of it, and I know every incorporated town in Maine. The place looked old, like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. There was a general store with a hand-painted sign, a post office with a rusted flagpole, and a diner with a neon open sign flickering in the window. Streetlights cast a dim, yellowish glow, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp earth. I parked the cruiser in front of the diner and stepped out. The silence was heavy, no crickets, no wind, just my boots scuffing the pavement. The diner's door jingled as I walked in, and 3 people turned to look. An old man in a flannel shirt at the counter, a waitress pouring coffee, and a young guy in a trucker hat playing a jukebox in the corner. They didn't seem surprised to see a trooper, but their stares felt off, like they were sizing me up. "Evening," I said, tipping my hat. "Just passing through." "Where am I exactly?" The waitress, maybe in her 40s, with tired eyes and a name tag reading Doris, smiled thinly. "Hollowell," she said, like it was obvious. "You lost, officer?" "Must be," I admitted. "This place isn't on my map." The old man chuckled, a low, raspy sound. "Maps don't always know what's what," he said, sipping his coffee. "You're here now, though." I asked for directions back to Route 11, but their answers were vague. Head south, look for the oak with the broken branch, that sort of thing. The young guy didn't speak, just kept flipping through jukebox songs, though no music played. I noticed the clock on the wall was stuck at 11:47. My phone had no signal, and the battery was draining fast despite being fully charged an hour ago. I thanked them and left, feeling their eyes on my back. Outside, I walked the main street, trying to get my bearings. The buildings were weathered but tidy, with details that felt too perfect, like a movie set. The general store's window displayed canned goods with labels I didn't recognize, brands like Harvest Pride and True Valley. A bulletin board by the post office had flyers for a town fair dated October 1953. I checked my cruiser's GPS again, still blank. The air felt colder now, and I swore I heard whispers, faint and wordless, coming from the woods. I got back in the cruiser and drove south, following the only road out of town. The forest swallowed me again, the pines looming like silent giants. After what felt like hours but was only 20 minutes by my watch, I saw the oak with the broken branch. I turned left, as Doris had said, and the road widened. Suddenly, my high beams caught the familiar green of a Route 11 sign. My radio crackled to life, and the GPS blinked back on, showing me right where I'd left the highway. I pulled over, heart pounding. I checked my dash cam, but the footage from the last hour was corrupted, just static. My phone's battery was at 5%. I drove straight to Fort Kent, filed my report, and said nothing about Hollowell. Who'd believe me? The next week, I went back during daylight, determined to find that road. I drove every mile of Route 11 between Ashland and Fort Kent, checked every side path. Nothing. No unmarked road, no oak with a broken branch. I scoured maps, old and new, and found no record of a town called Hollowell in Aroostook County or anywhere in Maine. I even asked locals in Ashland, farmers, loggers, old-timers who'd lived there their whole lives. Nobody had heard of it. I've gone over it 1,000 times. Maybe I was tired, maybe the road was a trick of the light, but I can still see Hollowell in my mind. The diner's neon sign, the smell of wood smoke, the clock stuck at 11:47. I've stopped patrolling that stretch of Route 11 at night. Maine's got its secrets, and some places, I've learned, don't want to be found. The call came in just after midnight, crackling through the radio at the dispatch office where I worked the graveyard shift. The voice belonged to Jimmy, a long-haul trucker who'd been running freight through the Southwest for decades. His tone was steady but uneasy, the kind of voice you get when you've seen something you can't quite explain. "Dispatch, this is Jimmy on 191, mile marker 78, just south of Bluff. There's a sheriff's car parked on the shoulder. Lights off, but someone's inside, and they're laughing. Hysterically. Ain't right. You might want to check it out. I jotted down the details, my pen scratching against the logbook. Route 191, the old U.S. highway slicing through southeastern Utah, was no stranger to odd stories. It's a lonely stretch, flanked by red rock mesas and endless desert scrub, where the silence feels heavier than the heat. I'd grown up in nearby Moab, so I knew the road well, its twists, its desolation, and the way it could make you feel like the only soul left on earth. Jimmy's call, though, sent a prickle down my spine. I told him I'd notify the San Juan County Sheriff's Office and signed off, but the unease lingered. The dispatch office was a cramped room in a strip mall off Moab's main drag, surrounded by tourist shops peddling turquoise jewelry and Jeep tour flyers. It was January 2025, and the desert chill seeped through the windows. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, relayed Jimmy's report, and got a tired deputy who promised to send someone out. But something about the call gnawed at me. I'd heard truckers talk about strange sightings on 191, lights in the sky, shadows crossing the road, but this felt different. Personal. I grabbed my jacket, told my coworker I was taking a break, and headed for my truck. Route 191 runs like a vein through Utah's canyon country, connecting small towns like Moab, Monticello, and Bluff before slipping into Arizona. The stretch Jimmy mentioned, near Bluff, is about 70 miles south of Moab, where the highway cuts through a landscape of eroded sandstone and sagebrush flats. The San Juan River snakes nearby, its cottonwood-lined banks a rare splash of green against the rust-colored cliffs. At night, the road is pitch black, save for the occasional glow of a passing rig or the distant lights of a Navajo hogan. It's a place where the world feels ancient, untouched, and maybe a little haunted. I drove south, the headlights of my old Ford pickup carving tunnels through the dark. The radio played low, some country station fading in and out. As I passed the turnoff for Arches National Park, the delicate arch silhouetted faintly against the starry sky, I tried to shake the feeling that I was chasing a ghost story. Mile marker 78 was near Valley of the Gods, a remote area where spires of red rock jut from the desert floor like the bones of some forgotten giant. It's a place tourists love for its stark beauty, but locals know it's not somewhere you linger after dark. When I reached the spot, the sheriff's car was exactly where Jimmy said it would be. A San Juan County cruiser parked on the gravel shoulder, its white paint gleaming faintly under my headlights. The lights were off, just as he'd described, and the engine wasn't running. I pulled over about 20 yards back, my truck idling, and sat there, heart thumping. The desert was dead quiet, the kind of silence that makes your own breathing sound loud. Then I heard it, a low, manic chuckle, rising and falling like a wave, coming from inside the cruiser. I cut my engine and stepped out, the cold biting through my jacket. The air smelled of dust and creosote. The cruiser's windows were tinted, but I could make out a shape in the driver's seat, slumped slightly, head bobbing as the laughter grew louder, then choked off into a wheeze. It wasn't the sound of someone joking. It was unhinged, like they were laughing at something only they could see. I called out, "Sheriff's Department? You okay in there?" No response, just more laughter, sharp and jagged. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call the sheriff's office again, but then I noticed something. The cruiser's license plate wasn't a Utah government plate. It was a civilian one, faded and rusted. That wasn't right. San Juan County cruisers are meticulously maintained, their plates clearly marked. This car looked wrong. Older. Like it hadn't been driven in years. I took a step closer, my boots crunching on the gravel, and the laughter stopped abruptly, like someone flipped a switch. The driver's door creaked open, and I froze. A figure stepped out, tall and lanky, wearing what looked like a sheriff's uniform, but it hung loosely, the fabric frayed at the cuffs. The man's face was shadowed under his hat, but his eyes caught the moonlight, wide, unblinking, like polished glass. He didn't speak, just stared, and then that laugh started again, low at first, building into a cackle that echoed off the cliffs. I backed toward my truck, my hand on the door handle, and shouted, "Sir, I'm with dispatch. Identify yourself." He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step toward me, then another, his boots dragging in the dirt. The laughter didn't stop, and now it sounded like it was coming from everywhere, behind me, above me, from the rocks themselves. I scrambled into my truck, locked the doors, and gunned the engine. As I peeled out, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was gone, and the cruiser sat empty, its door still open, swinging slightly in the wind. I didn't stop until I hit Bluff, a tiny town of low adobe buildings and a single gas station. I pulled into the lot, hands shaking, and called the sheriff's office again. The same deputy answered, sounding more alert now. I told him what I'd seen, my voice tripping over the words. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Ma'am, we don't have any cruisers out on 191 tonight. Nearest unit's in Monticello, 20 miles away." My stomach dropped. "Then whose car was that?" I asked. He didn't have an answer, just told me to stay put and wait for a deputy to meet me. I sat in my truck, the neon glow of the gas station sign casting shadows across the lot. Bluff felt like a ghost town at this hour, the only sound the hum of the station's fluorescent lights. When the deputy arrived, a young guy named Martinez, he listened to my story with a frown. We drove back to mile marker 78 together, his cruiser's lights flashing red and blue across the desert. The car was gone. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing but the faint outline of where it had been parked. Martinez swept his flashlight over the shoulder, the beam catching on a glint of metal half buried in the dirt. It was a badge, old and tarnished, with San Juan County Sheriff engraved on it. He bagged it as evidence, but his face said he didn't expect to find anything. Back at the dispatch office, I couldn't shake the image of that man's eyes or the sound of his laugh. I dug through old records, looking for anything about a sheriff's cruiser on 191. A week later, I found it, a newspaper clipping from 1978 about a deputy who'd vanished near Valley of the Gods. His cruiser was found abandoned, no trace of him. Locals said they'd heard laughter in the desert for weeks after. I still work the graveyard shift, but I don't drive 191 alone anymore. Some nights, when the radio's quiet, I swear I hear that laugh again, faint, carried on the wind.